So welcome. Welcome to The Face Within, introducing your unconscious blueprint. I'm Sue Lester, author of The Face Within, How to Change Your Unconscious Blueprint, also a speaker, and of course a head transition coach. So welcome wherever you are in Australia and beyond. I mean, that's the beauty of webinars when they work, and Skype, be able to connect wherever we are. And I certainly love being able to work with clients all over the globe. Now, today I'm going to be sharing with you how I actually discovered what I now call the unconscious blueprint, what it is and the impact it has on you, relationships, workplace dynamics, all sorts of applications. So I'll be sharing lots and lots of case studies, which of course names and some details have been changed. As we go, if there's any questions you've got, please feel free to type them in the question box. And of course, there's no such thing as a silly question, except those that you think of and don't ask. Because of course, if you're thinking of them, chances are someone else is too. If you're listening to the recording, then please feel free to email any questions to me afterwards. And my contact details will be on a couple of slides to come. So now I know for everyone's best intentions, life can get in the way. So I want to cover the 3 key points up front, just in case something gets in the way and you don't get through to the end. So this is all about head trash being cleared at source by updating unconscious blueprints of yourself and others. So head trash, highly technical term there. And I actually started using it because one of my clients, who's a business coach, introduced me to a room full of his own clients as, meet Sue, she clears my head trash. I thought, oh, perfect terminology for what I do. And of course, the fact you're sitting here listening now means you're more than familiar with head trash, even though you might have a different name for it. And that's not a criticism or a negative thing by any means, because the fact you're here means that you're interested in learning, you're stretching your boundaries. Chances are you've changed a career, and you're probably wives, mothers, daughters, or husbands, and sons, so you're juggling lots of commitments. So on your journey, of course, you've experienced fear, self-doubts, procrastination, wondered at times whether you're enough to manage it all, and who are you to do this, and maybe you've had that bitch on the shoulder whispering in your ear, criticizing you. You know, head trash is what wakes you up at 3 a.m. when you think, oh, I should have, and oh, if only, and then of course the dreaded what ifs. So basically, if you're human, you experience head trash at least part of the time. But of course, it's how you deal with it that counts. And in our roles as practitioners and coaches, I mean, that's what we help our clients do, deal with it. But of course, we need to deal with it ourselves in the first place. So some people deal with head trash by just tripping over it and going, oh, what was that? And continuing on their way, going around in circles, continually tripping over the same piece of head trash. Others will take big lumps of trash from their past, liberally sprinkle it all around their present, and toss a bit out in the future, just for good luck. Still others are in total denial, so they're limping along, dragging their heavy load, denying that there's anything wrong, and coming up with all sorts of reasons and excuses why they aren't as far ahead along their journey as other people around them. And of course, the key is acknowledging that awareness of the head trash, finding an effective way to deal with it, and then moving on. Unconscious blueprint is my name for the internal image. Unconscious because, of course, until you actually go looking for it, you're not aware of it. You're just responding as programmed. But what I've found is that significant changes can occur by updating or adjusting unconscious blueprints. And particularly in those difficult clients, and I don't mean difficult as in personality, but I don't know, chances are like me, you found at times there are clients that there just seems to be something that's stopping them from making that change. And for me, I found that unconscious blueprint was the key. So any new clients I get, one of the first things we do is check in, identify their unconscious blueprint and also their time stream. Because I found adjusting those two straight off makes it so much easier to get even more powerful results with the other tools and processes and techniques I use. Now, the second key point is about resources. There's lots available. Well, lots, as in 3. I wrote the book, The Face Within, and published it last year. So in that, I was tossing up when I was writing it whether to write it for practitioners, coaches, professionals side of things, or write for the client base. And I ended up going for the client base because I felt there was a greater need there. And yes, there are lots of self-help books around, and I know many of them end up being shelf-help. But some I found a bit like home waxing. You know, messy, painful, and the results don't last. Never quite what you want. So I designed this book more as a DIY head trash clearing kit. And it's written with the busy, overstretched woman in mind, so easy to read, easy to apply. And of course, for practitioners and professionals, some of the work in there will be a refresher. Others will be a totally different perspective or a different way of viewing different aspects, areas of life. And others will be brand new because it's my own work. So there's techniques, there's exercises, lots of interesting case studies, quotes. In there, you can I explain how to identify and also change your unconscious blueprint. So the process I describe in there is the swish pattern, because that's something that a person can do by themselves. That's not the process I use when I'm working one-on-one with clients, because I find I get deeper and more effective results by working with the submodalities, but I'll talk more about that later. And also how to identify and adjust the time stream too, because that's a simple, quick way, but it can have powerful impact on how people, their ability to move forward or not. So of course I'd love you to start at the beginning and read all the way through, but it's designed that you can open up any page or go through the key point summary at the end of the chapter and get what you need in a faster period of time. And it covers head trash in all areas of your life, from anxiety through to weight and wealth and, of course, the yes syndrome. The other resource is the training that I'm putting on for anyone who's done any sort of NLP training, simply because you need that extra understanding. Because I thought I'd put in enough for practitioners to grab it and run with it, but I found I was getting questions from different people saying, well, what happens if this happens? They've got 2 images, or they've got, they don't actually see themselves, they see a ghost. And when I sat down and started writing out the cheat sheet, I suddenly realized that I was actually taking it for granted. I mean, I've been working with this for, I don't know how long now, 4, maybe 5 years, and just developing it and growing it, and every client I learn something new and extend it. So actually it's, even though it's simple, it's actually more complex than I had given it credit for. So I'm putting on a training to share that in depth. The other resource is myself. So like I said, there's my email address. So feel free to contact me with any questions, particularly if you're listening to the recording. So a little bit about me. My work's all around clearing head trash, but the purpose of that is to peace of mind. I mean, that's the purpose. Because even though you might want cars and wealth and families and all sorts of things, everything you want, it really comes down to what you really want is peace of mind. So, you know, at the end of your life, you can look back and feel good about yourself, knowing that, yep, safe, you loved, you were enough, and you achieved what you wanted to achieve. And to be able to do that, you need the clarity, the confidence, and motivation. And for me, that's, in the work I do, it's an upward spiral. because you get through one level, or we get through one series of issues, you move up to the next level. And then there's a whole different set of different stages that you're moving through as you're going up. Now, just a little bit about me and how I got into learning and studying and using NLP. My background's actually in education and social enterprise. So when I first studied NLP, I was actually working for a social enterprise as a mentor coordinator. So it was my job to recruit, screen, train and support 195 volunteer adult mentors a year, and also train our staff members to train the students who we matched with the mentors. Kids from low socioeconomic homes, it was basically giving them a window to a different world by connecting them with safe adult role models. So NLP is invaluable in all those different aspects. But I really, the more I studied and when I got into my master's, was the therapeutic side of things. That fascinated me. So I actually started my own business, and I started working out of a natural therapies clinic in Paddington. And I started with focusing on unexplained infertility. And so I was getting great success with that, but I had people coming up saying, well, I love what you do, but I really don't want to get pregnant. Can you still help me? So of course. And then as things shift and change, and you've probably experienced this yourself, I started having people say, well, are you a coach? And I'd say, no. Do you do coaching? No. And then my own coach kicked me up the butt and said, well, why not? Why can't you combine the two? Because I had the training in coaching, and I just didn't see myself as a coach. So I developed that and developed my own coaching model, the head transition coaching, which is the therapeutic as well as the coaching side of things. And of course the speaking business that comes from part of that. And then I had another morphing, I guess, the end of last year. I suddenly realized, well, I was actually allowed to combine my two big passions, which was adventurous travel and my mindset shifting, my head trash clearing work. And when I looked at my caseload, I suddenly realized that the majority of my clients were what I call single wives. So husbands working away, or the actual family moving with them overseas, and the women being left to manage the household, the family, basically work as single mothers, and then all the shifting dynamics when the partner came home, because that changes things dramatically. So helping them cope. Some were also juggling businesses and their own careers. Others had put that on hold to follow their husbands overseas with the family, and were feeling pretty much lost. So, they'd given so much to everyone else, they'd lost the I out of their lives. And I guess I'm just flagging this to just know that it's okay for your business, you're in this situation, to change and morph as you grow and find your flow. And it's your unconscious blueprint that sometimes can hinder that. If there's a disconnect between where you want to go and what you're actually doing, or resistance, it's time to check in with your unconscious blueprint and see what's in there that could be holding you back. And likewise, when I'm talking about you and also your clients. So I'm there as a resource anytime you want to touch base. Happy to hear from you. So let's go back to that day. Back to the beginning. So at that stage I was working at Paddington Clinic in Brisbane as a master practitioner of NLP and hypnosis. And it was a day rather like today when Jeff came into my Paddington rooms. He was casually dressed in a way that spoke of money and success, and I could easily imagine him suited up, addressing a company board meeting. Yet as he sat there, right there in front of me, his hands trembled as he began to share his story. And he spoke of his increasing anxiety every time his phone rang, and the gut-wrenching fear that something dreadful had happened to one of his 3 children. His current wife was losing patience with him. Oh, get over it, Jeff. That didn't help. And the tears welled in his eyes as he confessed his children were pushing him away, and he was feeling more and more disconnected as his fears grew worse. And it was at this point a voice, a thought if you will, an inspiration, popped into my mind. An insistent voice. It persisted until I spoke it out aloud. And acting on that thought transformed Jeff's life, saved his sanity in marriage, and reunited him with his children. And since then I've used it with great effect with hundreds and hundreds of clients. So I've lost track over how many I've worked with over these years. But that insistent thought that buzzed in my head as I listened to Jeff just had to be spoken. Jeff, I said, this might sound a little strange, but please bear with me. Would you close your eyes a minute and bring up an image of your eldest boy? See him? Good. What age is he in that picture? Now, Jeff gave me 6 years old for his eldest, 10 years old for his daughter, and 6 for his youngest son. So a little discrepancy there. So how old do you think his children actually were? And what if I told you Jeff was in his early 70s? Yeah, his children were all in their 40s. The anxiety made sense now, because of course you'd be worried about a 6-year-old going out to work on a mine site. Of course you'd worry about your 10-year-old daughter living in Melbourne alone and feel uncomfortable rather than proud seeing her in a corporate office. And no wonder there was tension between Jeff and his children. I mean, what 40-year-old likes being treated like a 6-year-old? And Jeff had confessed to spending his days in long, boozy business lunches that often lasted well past his little children's bedtime. And of course, there was the inevitable divorce and the guilt that locked those images in place. And over the years, the guilt had just built up and built up until it overwhelmed him. And that was the anxiety that he was feeling. So I used a variety of NLP processes, updated his internal images of his children, adjusted his personal time stream, put the past behind him, and clear the excess guilt and fear out of his system. And then he was able to connect with his children as adults. And the phone ringing simply became a phone ringing. And we updated his own image as well to take him out of, well, that image was in his 40s. So we updated it, not to his 70s, because he was quite a youthful man. So he wanted to maintain the energy and the vigor and the, I guess, the mindset of a younger man, but with the maturity and wisdom that goes with someone being in their 50s, for example. I think that's what he chose at the time. And of course his marriage improved too, because his wife was no longer irritated by his irrational behaviour. Because of course she'd only known his children as adults, so it didn't make sense to her in the least why he would treat them like children. So let's have a look at some other case studies, and then I'll explain a bit more about why it works. So there was Anita from regional Queensland, and she was really struggling to attend networking events and take all those actions she needed to allow her businesses to flourish. And she was unable to drive a car by herself for more than 30 minutes without a panic attack. And she rarely left their rural-based home. And when we discovered that her unconscious blueprint was of a 6-year-old, she said it made perfect sense. Because her whole life, she'd always felt like she was looking up at people. I mean, it's not like she's a midget, she's average height. But she'd walk into a room and she'd feel like she was looking up at people. And through her work together, she's now able to drive herself all around the countryside, attending the markets and festivals she needs to grow her business, but also she attends as both a stallholder and also as a speaker on stage, which was a huge shift for her. And consequently, all sorts of things were shifting and changing in her life. She's even able to go overseas, book herself on a plane. And this is someone who struggled to get more than 30 minutes away from her own home. I mentioned before that I did a lot of work around unexplained infertility, And one particular client comes to mind. She was 28, and she said she and her husband desperately wanted to have a child. And they'd set up the family home and paid down their mortgage, are financially secure, everything was set up. They only needed the baby. But the thing was, she was terrified not only of giving birth, but also terrified of being pregnant. She said she felt, having something grow in her, it's just like not right. And she came to me because she was racked with guilt. Now, she'd become pregnant and had a miscarriage, but she wasn't guilty about that. She was guilty about the huge relief she felt at having miscarried. And when we checked in, her unconscious blueprint was of a 10-year-old, which made sense. Because of course giving birth is a scary option for a 10-year-old. And working with other clients, struggling with falling pregnant, internal images that seemed quite common were of the party girl. So the party girl image just didn't match the mothering, the nurturing. Others were sophisticated corporate career women, which didn't match with, leaking boobs and baby vomit on your shoulder, changing nappies. So it's adjusting that image so it's a nurturing image, someone you'd feel safe giving your child to care for. And the youngest unconscious blueprint I've come across is of a 4-year-old, and that particular client was 24 at the time, and she'd been spending her days crying on the sofa waiting for her abusive boyfriend to come home at night to play and wrestle, in his words. And she'd had one of those textbook horror childhoods, everything that awful could have happened had. And 4 was the last time she remembered feeling even a little bit safe. She was in custody with a stable, loving foster home for a few months at the time. And interesting, she said that she'd been to a psychologist who had told her she had the emotional age of a 5-year-old. So that fitted in as well. And I'm so proud of her for the huge progress she made in such a short time. Because once she fully understood, like we updated her image, actually that was interesting because with her, she was the first one I came across that we couldn't shift it all the way up to 24. Because normally you can do it in one hit. The oldest we could shift hers to was 16, and she said, well, that was the first time she was able to say no to abuse. So I decided to leave it at that and just continue on with the other work we were doing and just see what happened to her image. And once she fully understood that she wasn't the odd one out, that her values and morals were actually mainstream, and that her boyfriend was actually abusive, it's just that he wasn't as consistently and as violently abusive as others she'd known, she actually blossomed in our work together. And she made these amazing changes much faster than I expected. I got a call saying that she'd actually left the boyfriend, moved to another town, and she ended up getting herself on a management trainee fast track with an international retailer. And so she's just blossoming. Made a huge difference to her. And then once she told me about the shifting, the moving, I went in then and checked, and her unconscious blueprint was that of her current age. So what we did then was fine-tune it to the person that she was growing into, the person she wanted to be. So rather than the crumpled, stained T-shirt and shorts and the thongs, the dirty toenails, which was how she presented to me in our very first session, she was as she was, but confident, well-dressed, well-groomed. So we cemented that in place for her, and that helped her feel more comfortable with all of the changes that she was creating in her life. So you're probably aware that our conscious mind is about 5 to 10%, depending what you're reading. Unconscious 90 to 95, And I love the analogy that our conscious mind is a captain on board our ship of life, and our crew is our unconscious mind below deck. So of course, if your captain and crew aren't in alignment, your ship's not going to sail smooth. You go zigzag and a stall, turn around and go backwards. So you can think of the unconscious blueprint as your crew's map. So you imagine the choices they make, if they're following the map of a 40-year-old, is very different to the choices they'd make following the map of a 14-year-old, for example. And that's the way I explain to clients to help them understand how it works. And of course, updating the unconscious blueprint is only the starting point. You need supportive processes around it, and particularly boundary setting, because once, you would be aware of this with your own clients, they can make all the changes to themselves, but the people around them haven't changed, and they need help to help them deal with helping the others understand and accept the shifts and changes. So particularly the boundary setting and maintenance, of course. I find some beliefs automatically change, and others need to be adjusted, giving themselves permission to really embrace the new image of themselves and who they want to be and the choices they have in the world, and be able to take positive action from that. So let's have a look at some more impacts of disempowering unconscious blueprints. And as I go through a few of these, I'm sure you can relate them to your own clients, ones you're working with now or perhaps have worked with in the past. And seeing what a difference just checking in with their unconscious blueprints could, how that could help them as well as you. So there's John. Okay, so John was an extremely successful businessman. But his business had got to the point where it was starting to stall. But in his personal life, when it came to asking someone out, he just turned into a blithering mess. And when we checked in with his, he had two unconscious blueprints. One of a confident businessman in his late 20s, I think that was. And at that stage, John was early 40s. And then the second image underneath that was of a spotty supermarket trolley boy, bit overweight, sort that blush every time anything vaguely female goes past. And, you know, he used to be called Pizza Face. So that hopefully will paint a nice image for you. So you can understand why Pizza Face would have trouble asking anyone out on a date, because he would automatically expect rejection. So what I did with those two was combine the two, because the business image was fine up to a point, but he needed more maturity and steady focus that comes with that maturity. So we updated to an image in his late 30s. And of course updated the spotty trolley boy, because I mean he was actually quite a nice looking guy. And combined the two, so he was more congruent and he could be equally as successful in business as personal life, and that made a huge difference for him. He also needed then some help on actually talking with women, and but you know, this was the starting point. Then there was Frida. So she tried all sorts of weight diets and fads and all sorts of things, and no matter how much she exercised, she didn't seem to be shifting much. And she had a fat and frumpy, actually quite fat internal image, unconscious blueprint. So we changed that, and then her crew, unconscious mind, were able to navigate and make choices the way a slim, healthy person would, because then it becomes easier, you're congruent. And I think that's where the key is there. So some signs you might look for to check the unconscious blueprint time stream's position is if someone's holding on to the past or fearing the future. In other words, they're presenting with anxiety, and they've got low self-confidence, self-worth, and particularly self-trust. In my experience, their unconscious blueprint's more likely to be around the primary school age. because they're acting like a 10-year-old in an adult world. Someone who's playing small in business or has speaking fears. Well, speaking fears can come from any age, but that playing small in business, that uncertainty, often they're around the teenage years. There could be boundary setting issues, that, well, nice girls don't say no or not allowed to say no, depending on their upbringing. Others who are displaying drinking, eating, smoking, drugs and sex sort of misbehaviour, that's the rebellious teenager, you can't tell me what to do sort of attitude. And of course, if they've got a young unconscious blueprint, and they're not necessarily younger than chronological age, they can be older, but the younger ones are particularly vulnerable to emotional blackmail because, there's no secure, mature core there. And it never ceases to amaze me the variety of unconscious blueprints. Some are empowering, some are disempowering. Some can be younger, some can be older, has bits of bodies. One woman was particularly concerned with her weight, and that was her identity. So rather than seeing her whole self or even her face, she just saw her hips, her butt, and her belly. That was her internal image of herself. So no wonder that was impacting on her. I've had ghosts. I've had elderly people, elderly images. And that was interesting because that particular client was starting to move towards suicidal talk. And he seemed to have this unconscious blueprint of an older person, as in he was wishing he was, come to the end of his life so then he wouldn't have to go through the pain anymore. So bringing that back to his chronological age made a big difference for him. The ghost one was more he felt that he was invisible. So doing some grounding work helped cement in his new unconscious blueprint as, a solid person who's actually there, and connecting him with others and connecting him to the community he was living in. But it's not just, obviously you have an unconscious blueprint of yourself, but you also have it of others, or you can have it of others. And it really shows up in relationships. And you can be disempowering yourself or disempowering the other person. So, it's either the power play versus the doormat. Now, it really shows up in relationships, particularly if the woman finds that she seems to be treating her husband like another teenager, another one of the kids, picking up his dirty socks and nagging and blah, 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 blah. So, of course, the lovemaking suffers because he's not the stud muffin she married. And it's not uncommon to find quite a disempowering unconscious blueprint in spouses. So that needs to be shifted, or that can be shifted to make an easier shift in the relationship. Another sign of disempowering unconscious blueprints is if there's a disagreement, the differences are taken personally. And there's sulking, there's the silent treatment. If you've got couples that are working together, that's a whole different dynamic. And that's the case. I've found that having two unconscious blueprints can actually be quite powerful because they can have the one as the business partner that they respect and admire, work well in together, and then they can have the personal image, the stud muffin, the sex kitten, the loving romantic partner image. I remember seeing an interview with Donald Trump, and I don't know whether you remember, one of his wives was Ivana. Gorgeous blonde beehive thing. It's a bit like Patsy out of Absolutely Fab, actually. But anyway, but she was smart, and she learned an enormous amount of business from him. But he said there was one morning at breakfast, he looked at her and realized he was having breakfast with a business partner. He'd lost his wife. So she had to go, and he got himself a wife because he actually wanted to have breakfast with a wife, not a business partner. And of course, the impact on children. how you view them. I remember doing this exercise in a workshop I was running, and one of the participants was just a. You know, just a mum. She was just a carer. And so, but she was wanting to shift and actually get a job, a career starting for herself. So we needed to update her unconscious blueprint so she could actually have a more empowering image of herself as the business person she wanted to be. And then we went in and they had a choice. They could choose someone that in their personal life or business life that they'd been having difficulty with, and go in and just check out what the unconscious blueprint of that person was. And at that point she burst into tears. And she said that because it's like, oh wow, suddenly realised she saw her disabled child as a 3-month-old baby, but he was actually 3 years old. And she'd been having terrible time with his behaviour, and he was playing up. But that made sense because at some level he knew he was a little boy. He knew he wasn't a baby. So yes, he mightn't be able to do what all the other little boys did, but he knew he wasn't a baby. So once she started treating him as a 3-year-old, he suddenly started hitting his milestones and his behaviour improved. He still got frustrated, of course, but nowhere near to the same degree as when she was treating him, talking to him like a baby. So that's the key as parents. If you've got photographs of your kids, make sure they're up to date. And if your parents have got photographs of you around their house, make sure they're up to date as well. Oh, that reminds me, I sold a copy of my book to a practitioner, a businesswoman actually, not a practitioner, recently, and she sent me a message on Facebook saying that she got to the bit about parents holding disempowering unconscious blueprints of their children. She said, that makes sense. Family business, lots of dynamics happening there with the father. And she said, I realised that when he sits at his desk deciding what to be done and who to delegate to, he sits at his desk and he looks at a photo of us, you know, the kids, and it's a photo of us in our teens, yet the youngest of us is now 37. So her plan of action is to get that photo updated. So he's looking at his adult children rather than looking at his teenagers when he's thinking of who to delegate. And that's a physical image, but you bet inside that's the image he would be seeing as well. And of course, working with children, training staff or pets, you're the role model. So if you catch yourself being emotional and fighting with your children like one of the children, that's a warning sign. And of course, we can hold children back by installing our fears into them, by being overly protective. And if you're still thinking of your 16-year-old as a 6-year-old, well, then there's going to be conflict because your image of them doesn't match their image of themselves. So that's something to be aware of. And likewise in the workplace, but we'll get back to the workplace in a minute. I've had a few clients that needed help when they were forever rescuing their children, you know, adult children asking for money. And of course, changing their internal image of their children makes one shift, but then they need the help with the boundary setting because there's resistance, of course. If, you know, I was thinking of a particular client, her son wasn't terribly impressed when she stopped giving him money whenever he asked for it, stopped rescuing him, because that meant he actually had to step up, take responsibility, and make changes in his own life. So of course there was resentment, there was fighting and all sorts of things, but he got over that because she stayed firm. And in the end, she actually got more respect because at that deepest level he knew that he shouldn't have been asking, he shouldn't have been feeding off her mother, and he didn't respect her for being silly enough to give in to him. So once again, that boundary setting and helping your clients set new boundaries is crucial. So workplace dynamics plays out enormously. I mean, there's a reason why sometimes workplaces seem like schoolyards. You know, the office politics? It's because everyone's acting like the kids that, you know, some of them are inside. Let me share an example. I'll call her Jenny. So when we started working, Jenny, she had a fat and frumpy internal image, but she wanted to change. So we updated that, and all of a sudden she was booking to have her hair done, her makeup done, image makeover, and had some gorgeous photos taken for her new website. So she made great progress, just shifting that from, the mum working from home to the businesswoman internal image, which was congruent with where she was taking her business and her potential. And that's the thing, you need congruency. But she come back to me for a maintenance session, and she said she's having trouble with everything was going really well, but there's a particular client she's having trouble getting money from. So we went in and had a look, and her unconscious blueprint was actually of two people in the same image from that company. So there was the gatekeeper as such, the administration person, who she saw as so a snarling hyena type. And then there was the owner of the company who came across as a big bullying rhinoceros of a man, the aggressive, the image of the snorting and the ready to charge sort. So with that one, it was a case of divide and conquer. So we looked at the woman first, and it turns out my client knew her as, she used to see her on the weekends, with the kids playing soccer. So she's a soccer mum. So we just updated her image from the snarling hyena to the soccer mum. No threat, she's just an ordinary mum and yelling at the ref, doing whatever the soccer mums are doing. So that sort of cancelled her out as a threat. With the owner of the company, I asked her to imagine that she saw him walking along the street. What did he look like? Well, so he was sort of a bit stooped over, a little bit of a pot belly, anxious, sort of scurrying sort of person. So quite different in reality to her snorting rhinoceros image. So I checked in and said, well, if you'd broken down and you saw him come along, would you feel comfortable asking him for help? And yes. So that was the image we chose and updated the rhinoceros to that. And then she had the action step was to then contact the company. So she was going to email the office. I said, no, hang on. You're on the same level as the owner of the company. Why don't you just pick up the phone and speak to him? And then I got an email the next day saying the money's already in my bank. So how's that for an outcome? So workplace dynamics, it plays out people empowering or disempowering other people that they work with. Another client, Janet, who was being bullied by one of her own staff members, because for Janet, she saw herself as just a, rather than a successful businesswoman. And her unconscious blueprint of her staff member was actually as an older, more assertive, aggressive than the girl was, or the woman was in her mid-20s, I think. So that was interesting, shifting that. And of course then she could let her go and move on. So if there's intimidation, there's threats, there's politicking, and there's schoolyard stuff happening in your workplace, checking out unconscious blueprints is a way of dealing with that and bringing people back. Because, life's, as the picture says, life's too short to spend with anyone who wants to change you to fit their idea of who you should be. And that poor little dog's actually in a leopard costume. That doesn't really show up in the picture that well. So I mentioned there's lots of different varieties. They can be young and old, empowered, disempowered, they can be body parts. And there's always that conflict between how you see yourself and how others see you as well. And that's the thing, you change careers, and you probably experienced this yourself. You change careers, you've done personal development, you've changed. But other people's unconscious blueprints of you haven't been updated. So that's something to be aware of and help them do that by, I guess, your behavior, but photographs, but You can't always change other people, of course, or very rarely. You're going to change yourself and be true to yourself and help them with your own behaviour adjust theirs. But know that you've got a choice. So if you've got a family gathering, you can slot back into and match their blueprint of you, or you can stay true to yourself and give them the opportunity to see who you really are now and adjust their own. Likewise with friends. You can hold on to them, or you can make room for the new ones. So I know we've had connections with people not being able to get online. So if you've got any questions about this at this point, feel free to ask. And those of you listening to the recording, like I said, feel free to email me through. Helps if you have the question slide. So I guess the key is that I do use shifting submodalities when I'm doing my own work, but I use the swish pattern in my book as something that people can do by themselves. Okay, so I can't see any questions coming through at the moment. So basically, those three key points: your head trash, be cleared at source by updating the unconscious blueprint of yourself and others. And it's something to be aware of. It's another tool in your belt for helping yourself and also your clients, of course. I had a comment after a speaking gig recently, and someone said, well, you know, I've been to lots of personal development over the years and I've never heard of the unconscious blueprint. And that's because this is my own work and certainly my own label for it. And so the intention in the year, so that it's common knowledge and it's something that you automatically check, update, because it makes the rest of your work so much easier and you get so much faster progress for your clients. And of course, you don't have to be sick to get better. And speaking of that, I mean, there's applications, and I talk about that more in the training. You can use it to help people heal, support their healing processes. You can use it for helping smokers become healthy people. There's applications in sports psychology as well. And of course, as I mentioned, in workplace dynamics, that's a whole thing in itself. You can use it for weight reduction, definitely in personal relationships, particularly when there's conflict in a marriage. So there's actually lots and lots of applications for it. As I mentioned before, in the book, there's lots of information, different ways of using it in there as well, but the training is definitely a really in-depth. So one session is on elicitation, so all the different aspects of that, what to do if you get partial or multiple blueprints, the pre-framing, practical demonstration, so we'll actually go in and help you discover yours and get the fine-tuning there. Answering things, well, what if I'm not visual? What do you do with a client who says that they can't see anything? The second part is about change, so techniques and cheat sheets, situations I've found where it's best not to change the unconscious blueprint, what to do when there's a couple of stages are needed, how to change blueprints of other people, whether to use mirrors or photos, and most importantly, putting those support processes in place. And then the third section is the application, so using it in relationships, in workplace dynamics, healing support, weight reduction or weight increase, sports performance, and of course the opportunity to troubleshoot for your own particular clients. And part of the deal is it's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. Sorry, 1 session, repeated it's over a 3-week period. 1 session per week. In that time, as much email access as you need to answer questions, and then of course afterwards you feel free to ask any questions, to check in, share your stories. But that's all from me right now. So if you, like I said, if you're listening to the recording, you've got questions, feel free to contact me. You can get the book from website address /shop. Also on that link is the link to Eventbrite, which is when you can book in and grab your place on the training. So there's an early bird special and also a special for Australian Board of NLP members. And you can save yourself $100 on that. So that's growingcontent.com.au/shop. So I look forward to hearing from you. Keep in touch. I think I mentioned on my website, if you want to keep in touch via monthly newsletter and grab an ebook resource on love languages, feel free to jump over to the website, put your details on there. Otherwise, I look forward to catching up with you somewhere on social media or in person or via email. So this is Sue Lester, Head Transition Coach at Growing Content, wishing you a fabulous day and looking forward to connecting again soon. So bye for now.